Um, I don't know if I want to edit this. I really don't. I hate editing videos. I genuinely hate editing videos. I'm just gonna read my script, okay? I've been sitting on this information for almost 2 years because I was afraid of the blowback if I spoke the truth. Because I have no idea how powerful these people are. But I think it's important that people understand how things work and how things happen and how things stop happening or why they stop happening. And so I wrote about all of my experiences with One Fair Wage, the petition which claimed to want to raise the minimum wage to make it a livable wage. Um, my experiences were quite negative, as were most people's in Arizona. And, well, I wrote 12 pages about how terrible they were in the 6 weeks that I was there. I was there for 6 weeks, and I wrote 12 pages about how bad they were to work for. We could have ended the minimum wage battle in Arizona once and for all. When I found out about the petition, I was thrilled to have a chance to change the economy. I had been focusing on my studies for 6 months and thus had been out of work since the 2022 midterm election. Then in May, I decided to check the Secretary of State's website to see what petitions were active. I spent months canvassing door to door last year and loved working on petitions. They're the best way to really see the impact your work has on the community. You talk with tons of people every day, you see the overwhelming support for the movement, and you can see in your hands the 10, 20, 30 signatures you've contributed to changing the political landscape. I wanted back into activism, and so I wanted to work petitions. So I checked the Secretary of State's website, and there I discovered the Raise the Wage Act, proposed by One Fair Wage. At the time, and currently, the minimum wage in Arizona is set to increase in line with increases in the cost of living. Notably, this is not to match the cost of living, meaning that the minimum wage regularly increases, but it never increases by enough to become a livable wage. The petition would raise the minimum wage from $13.85 in 2023 to $18 in 2028 by increasing by an additional dollar for 3 years. But more importantly, it would remove sub-minimum wages. That means tipped workers who make $3 less per hour would be guaranteed a full minimum wage in addition to tips. That would revolutionize the service industry, guaranteeing every tipped worker earns enough to make a living instead of relying on tips, which fluctuate based on time of day, time of year, day of the week, weather, race, ethnicity, gender, appearance of the service worker, and the freaking mood that the customer is in. In a world where rent costs at least $1,300 for a studio, nobody's income should be affected by immutable characteristics or whether their customers are just having a bad day. If the petition garnered just over 240,000 valid signatures, the 2024 election would have voted on putting this into law. The Secretary of State's website also had contact information for the lawyer who filed the petition, so I emailed him immediately asking him to get connected with a recruiter. 1 week later, I had the job. I was getting $18 an hour to collect signatures in Phoenix. It was a little under the market rate for canvassing work. Typically, it was $22 everywhere else I knew. But at least it aligns with the wage they're asking for, right? That makes sense. Also, nothing else was active at the time, so this was the only canvassing work there was. At the end of the job interview, I was offered the position, and of course I took it. Immediately, they had me start onboarding paperwork and training, like right out of the interview, which I thought was a little unprofessional. I expected that they'd shake hands with me and give me a call back in another week, as is standard with entry-level jobs. But instead, I was stuck in their office doing paperwork for 2 hours. My dad drove me to the interview and fell asleep in the car waiting for me to finish. Those hours were unpaid, by the way. I'm pretty sure you're supposed to be on the clock during onboarding. I think it's too late to file a complaint about that now, though. During training, the trainer asked me what I knew about the petition so far. I asked and said, I've done all the research, and explained what I knew. And they said, but you know what? I haven't actually signed it yet. Sorry, I haven't actually read this since I wrote it a year ago. I said, you know what? I haven't actually signed it yet. I told her, and I reached for the petition to sign my name and do my part to contribute to the petition, but to my surprise, she actually pulled the clipboard away from me. Said, you can sign it on your own time. You're not gonna let me sign the petition that you're gonna pay me to collect signatures for? Those words, they still echo in my ears. You can sign it on your own time. Insane. That was the first major red flag. But over the course of the next several weeks, I learned just how little One Fair Wage actually cares about its workers. The routine. If you've never canvassed before, here's how a typical canvassing shift goes for petitioners. We come into our office, and after clocking in, we grab our clipboards and petition packets. Sometimes we'll run through canvassing role plays, basically practicing our rhetoric on each other to give each other feedback on how to ask for signatures. Then we're assigned to our sites to canvass and are driven out to those sites. We then spend hours at that location collecting signatures and are only relocated if there is a threat to safety, or if there's not enough foot traffic to collect signatures, or if we are kicked out of the area by security. Often we canvass in areas where we're not permitted, like Walmart parking lots. This is pretty standard across the industry. However, some Walmarts are not cool with canvassers talking to all their customers, especially if their customers complain about us. Essentially, this means we'll canvass anywhere until we're told to leave. It's not really a problem, it's just part of the job. When you get started, it really makes you nervous because you're like, oh no, I'm going to get kicked out, I'm going to get kicked out, I'm going to get kicked out. But at a certain point, you just be like, let's see how long it takes. At the end of the shift, we head back to the office, turn in our petition sheets, and prepare them to be notarized. Once they are stamped and signed by a notary, they can be submitted to the quality control and validation team for counting and validating. Payroll. I worked for One Fair Wage for roughly 6 weeks, clocking in 30 hours a week to help the working class. They only did shifts of 5 to 6 hours and were only open 5 days a week, so the only way to work more than that was to do double shifts, totaling 11 hours a day. Temperatures may have only been in the 90s, which is relatively low for a Phoenix summer, but I was not going to do an 11-hour shift in the sun, so I only did 30. And still, in my short time for the org, I experienced the most unprofessional work experience in my life so far, which admittedly wasn't much, but still remains true. Most unprofessional work experience up to where I am now. In just 6 weeks, I had to submit my payment information and proof of citizenship to Pedro Paredes 5 separate times, each through a different method. First, they had me submit my documents through an email to HR. Then I had to submit them through a payroll app called Homebase. Both of these methods seemed kind of legitimate enough, but I still felt insecure emailing my personal documents. I then had to email them again to Pedro himself. Then I had to upload them to Intuit, another payroll app. And in my last week, I got an email asking me to resubmit my documents again through a Google form. I did not trust the security of a Google form whatsoever, but I wouldn't risk waiting several weeks for my paycheck, so I did what I had to do. Insecure payroll documents made us all uncomfortable and put us all at risk of identity theft. If our emails and Google Forms were breached, our information could be used to access our bank accounts, steal our identities, and such. And it's just like sitting around in an unsecure email. That sucks. Remember, I only worked there for a short time. Others had worked there for months, and they experienced many worse things. Oh, someone else told me once that their paper paycheck was withheld for almost 3 weeks because the manager accidentally took it with him on a business trip to Tucson. That's kind of crazy. You can't just make accidents that end up with people not getting their payments. That's insane. Before we go any further, I'd like to also talk about the impact of nepotism on One Fair Wage. Pedro Paredes, the overall campaign manager, or Pedro Paredes was the overall statewide campaign manager, but it was his sister, Marisol, in the office most of the time. But make no mistake, Pedro was always aware of and supportive of her actions as manager, or her official title, captain. Not once did I ever see Marisol get into the field and collect signatures. And yet she was in charge every day of deciding which sites we canvassed at. Now, I don't know about you, but I find it extremely hard to respect someone who gets paid an extra $5 to manage my labor, but doesn't do it themselves. And Marisol wasn't the only family hire. In fact, the vast majority of non-field positions at One Fair Wage were filled by Pedro's family. Several former One Fair Wage workers I've talked to have attested to me that Pedro had around 7 family members on his payroll, and none of them actually went out and collected signatures. I have a little story here called Can I Go Home? So we only had 5 days a week, 6 hours apiece. In order to make 40 hours, we had to do 2 double shifts a week, which meant taking a 30-minute break and then working an additional 5 hours. That's your double shift. You work 6 hours, 30-minute break, 5 more hours. But one day, as summer was ramping up, the temperature jumped around 10 to 15 degrees. I was feeling particularly unwell. After my first 6 hours, I felt dizzy, like I couldn't continue working, so I asked to call out of my second shift, but I was told by Marisol, sorry, you needed to run it by Pedro himself if you want to leave early. But Pedro wasn't in the office very often, so I'd have to call him. Making me call a manager who isn't even in the office is a strong disincentive to calling out, and I think it's kind of unfair to people who don't like making phone calls. I don't think you should make it that difficult. I'm kind of joking about it being unfair, but that is an unnecessary and arbitrary obstacle that isn't lost on me. Now I have to wonder if I'm disturbing him while he's busy, or how directly calling out of the shift is going to affect his impression of me. Is he going to think of me as lazy for this? I worked up the courage to call him. Said, hey Pedro, it's Eli. I know I'm scheduled for a second shift today, but I'm still getting used to the heat, and I'm feeling a little sick from it. So I'd like to just go home now and recover. Is that all right? And he responded to me. He said, well, I'm going to be honest with you here. You don't sound sick. And you made a commitment to me when I posted that schedule. You committed to working these hours, and you're supposed to work the hours you're committed to. At least try, okay? We have a deadline coming up. Just try, and if you still feel bad in a few hours, you can go, okay? I wasn't the only one who tried to call out that day. A coworker also tried to call out, but Pedro didn't even pick up for him. 3 minutes later, Marisol came to the break room and asked to talk to me and Juan outside. Hey guys, Pedro just called me and told me you guys are trying to get out of working today. He's very busy, so you really should have been coming to me about this. And that pissed me off. She just contradicted herself. Just minutes before, she told me to go to Pedro. Now she's upset at me for not doing so. For the next 40 minutes, No. For the next 40 minutes, she argued with Juan about, we have goals to meet, and you made a commitment to this schedule. To which he responded with, well, I don't think you really have a right, and I'm telling you, I don't feel good about working. We're in the sun all day, and if I don't work good, I don't get paid. That's on me. Even if it's saving you money. Because I'm not going to be good at collecting signatures if I'm feeling like this. That's what Juan said. Not exactly those words, but basically those words. She chewed him out for 40 minutes about this, though. We have goals to meet. You made a commitment to this schedule, just like Pedro was saying. And despite both our pleas, we both ended up working that evening. It was regularly 110 plus in May, and the heat sickness is a real issue that employers need to take seriously. Every other company I've canvassed for has been extremely sympathetic to heat issues and has offered Uber rides to take canvassers back to HQ or even straight back to their home if they report symptoms of heat stroke. So to demand us to work outside in the heat when we're feeling unwell is just cruel. I have another story for you guys. This one's called Buy Your Own Water. On May 28th, 2023, we ran out of bottled water at the office. Every employer in Arizona has an obligation to provide water to their employees. Every restaurant in Arizona is required to provide free water to people who come in, regardless of if they spend money or not. My point being that we have a culture of guaranteeing water to one another in this state, since denying someone water could actually be life-threatening. In fact, 579 people died from heat in 2023 in Arizona. Water access needs to be taken seriously. So when I asked if they would get us more water before sending us into the field, they told me, buy your own water. And well, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. Said, okay, will you at least give me money to buy water? And they said, no, that's on you. It's your choice whether to buy water or not. I had already worked 6 hours that day and I was about to start my second shift. And I only had one bottle of water to last me 5 hours. I don't think I had a choice. That happened a few more times that week. They just didn't buy water the rest of the month. They just kept saying, buy your own water. I didn't have money to buy water, so I don't know how I'm alive, quite honestly. Anyway, we have another story. Wage theft. On that same day, I was sent to Avondale to canvass. I had never been out there, and because it was so far from HQ in downtown Phoenix, it took 45 minutes to get to the site I was assigned to. The shift started at 4, and it was already nearly 5. Over the next 2 hours, I was kicked out of 3 sites, and for some reason my driver, Juan, was assigned to canvass in Goodyear, so he was a 20-minute drive away from me. I was told by Marisol to walk from site to site, because we didn't want to take him out of the field for so long. They were each about a 10 to 15-minute walk away. Of course, with getting kicked out of 3 locations and made to walk to sites on my own, I hardly got any signatures. 3 hours into my shift, I had 9 signatures. So at 7:10 p.m., I got the call I had finally been hoping for. Marisol was going to have me brought back to the office to clock out early since I was not performing well. I expected I would be picked up by Juan within 15 minutes and be back at the office within the hour. Instead, to keep one in the field and save the company's money, another petition captain's husband, who didn't even work here, was asked to drive to Avondale and pick me up. Sorry, I spaced out while reading. I thought Juan would pick me up within 15 minutes, but they wanted to keep him in the field. And so, petition captain's husband, who didn't even work here, was asked to drive to Avondale and pick me up. And since he didn't even work here, he was nowhere nearby. So I had to wait nearly 40 minutes, without water, mind you, to be picked up. Thankfully, traffic had cleared up, so the drive back to HQ was much shorter. I got to the office around 7:55 and filed my paperwork quickly so I could clock out and head home. However, Marisol and Flor had other ideas in mind. I overheard them speaking to each other. Yeah, so he stopped working at 7 when we called him, so you can just clock him out for that time. Marisol said to Flor. I watched Flor, the other captain. That was her name, Flor. I watched her mark 7:10 as my clock out time on a paper. I questioned this, but Marisol told me, well, you really stopped working at 7:10 when we called you, and after that point, you are no longer producing signatures for us, so we are not paying you for anything after that. And I say back, but I was on the clock for almost another hour. And she says, yes, but you weren't actually working, so we're fixing the timesheet to show that. It's really just not fair for us to have to... But I interrupted her. After the whole you committed to this schedule debacle, I learned that she had a tendency to go into long-winded paragraphs, over-explaining and repeating herself until we give up. And I wasn't going to suffer through that, so I said, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm not on the clock. Bye. And I left the building immediately and slammed the door on my way out. Once back home, I texted all my coworkers about what had happened and took screenshots of my timesheets according to the app I clocked in and out on, and of my call history. I'll put those images on the screen now. This call history shows each time that I was called and told where my new site would be and when I would start walking. In the 7:09 call is when she was telling me that I would clock out early. A 7:35 call to verify the address to pick me up at, as proof that I was still working past 7:10. The first timesheet screenshot shows that I left the office and clicked clock out on home base at 8 p.m. The next one shows the timesheet after it was edited by Pedro and Marisol a week later, showing that I clocked out at 7:10 p.m., which is incorrect. See, the reason I was sent home early that day was because I wasn't hitting One Fair Wages soft quota, hard quota of 40 signatures per shift. I say soft quota because sometimes it wasn't so soft. See, in Arizona, it is actually illegal to have quotas for petition circulators or per signature payments unless they are candidate petitions. They cannot be for issues to get a quota or per signature payment. This is to disincentivize fraud, because if you were paid for every signature, then you would commit fraud to get more payment. So, like, that's how fraud happens. That's how fraudulent signatures are incentivized. And I agree with that rule, because I think fraudulent signatures shouldn't be incentivized. I think genuine signatures should be incentivized, because that gives more, like, legitimacy to the cause if there's, like, an actual public mandate behind it. So it's illegal to do quotas. You can do goals, but you can't do quotas. They call it a goal. But they sent me home because I wasn't on track to hit my goal. In fact, they send people home all the time if they're not on track to hit their goal, because it's not just a goal. It's a quota. It's a quota. All right, next story. Bad sites, quotas, and lies. We always had to go to tough sites, mostly grocery stores and parking lots. Grocery store parking lots, sorry. We had lots of ideas for places to go to, as we had all worked on other campaigns, but we needed written permission from the owners to canvass there. These were usually shut down on account of other orgs having already obtained written permission to canvass there, or because Pedro or Marisol didn't care to ask for permission from them. Other times, they just wanted to keep us at the parking lots. Our management, I mean to say. During May, I recall being on the light rail when the train began being boarded by swarms of cosplayers. They were dressed as anime characters, as wizards, pilots, monsters, and such. I asked the cosplayers, and they told me where they're going. They're going to Fan Fusion, Phoenix's version of Comic-Con. And as the light rail passed the stop for the convention center, I watched about 200 people from my train alone got off and headed towards the convention. And I thought, man, that seems fun. I mentioned the convention at the office. None of the captains were aware of it. As managers of a campaign, which relies on finding high foot traffic locations and events, they should probably be ashamed not to be aware of one of the largest events in Arizona. Still, they decided to send me, and me alone, to the convention to canvass near the entrance and exit, and it went remarkably well. I hit and surpassed my goal easily, and had a lot of fun seeing so many costumes. The convention continued for 3 days, but we weren't sent back there. We had to argue to be sent there, and on the third day, several of us were assigned to parking lots in Goodyear, but our drivers refused to go. But they also didn't want to argue with management. They didn't want to drive all that way because they had issues with how low the gas mileage compensation was. It was a meager $5 stipend if you drove more than 20 miles total in a shift. That didn't scale if you drove, say, 80 miles. So instead of driving to Goodyear, we all snuck to Fan Fusion. Almost every time. The four of us. 2 by the entrances, 2 by the exits. And 2 patrolling the downtown... 2 of us by the entrances and exits, which were, at one area. And 2 of us patrolling the surrounding downtown area of Phoenix. And we all did great and passed our goals only because we defied orders and took things into our own hands. A good campaign shouldn't stand to benefit from insubordination, but overlooking one of the most potentially helpful events was something we couldn't just stand idly by. And it was a fun place, and we wanted to be there. People even handed us their passes since they didn't want to go back. And so we actually snuck in ourselves and had some fun for 20 minutes at the end of our shift. On the last day I worked there, me and 2 other canvassers were assigned to various strip malls in South Phoenix, and our driver, who had fallen on hard times, wasn't a fan of this because they'd have to spend even more gas driving between several sites. After just half an hour, 2 of us were kicked out of the parking lots we were at, and that's when we were told, well, there's an auto zone across the street. You should just canvass there for the rest of the shift, and the others can go to this park and to Panda Express. It's fucking ridiculous. AutoZone certainly does not have the foot traffic to support canvassers, and the clientele are going to be busy. And that just means they're even more likely to decline to sign. And Panda Express certainly wouldn't let us be right outside their door disturbing all their customers. And anywhere else in the parking lot, we wouldn't be able to reach people before we get inside. So against our manager's direction, we went to a Walmart that we'd all been to before, that we knew we could get our signatures at. But there actually wasn't enough for all of us. Throughout the day, managers call us to check on how many signatures we were doing and to check on where we were. Right? We would lie about how many signatures we currently had to trick our managers into sending us to better sites, except we would already be at those better sites, and so we're making up the low numbers related to the bad sites so that they understand that we need to go to the good sites. And then it also makes the good sites seem a lot better when your numbers certainly go up. So we're supposed to be at AutoZone, Panda Express, and the park, but we are actually all three at Walmart. Right? And we're doing great. But we're reporting back to HQ, hey, I only got 8 signatures when we actually have 12. Then HQ's like, maybe we ought to move you because you're not doing so well. And we're like, yes, stop sending me to AutoZone. We'd probably be more like 3 signatures at AutoZone. So we would lie about where we were, except, and how we're doing, except we wouldn't all tell the same lie. And that became a problem. Throughout the day, managers called us to ask where we were because we had been relocated a few times. But our driver would lie and say we're still at one place, and we'd be honest and say we're actually at Walmart. And then we'd cross-reference our lie and start saying, no, we went to Walmart Rogue, but then we went back to the park and such. And the whole web of lies from miscommunications and trying to sublead to managers that we think their spots are shit. It became so much. We couldn't go where they asked us to, or we wouldn't hit goal, and we'd lose hours if we didn't hit goal. But if we went rogue trying to keep our jobs, we'd get caught in a web of lies quick and then probably fired for lying. So all of this was too much for me. And the next day, I no-showed. And 30 minutes after my shift would have started, a manager called, and I let it ring out. She called again. And I let it ring out again. She called me one more time. And I let it ring out again. And that was haunting. That was the end of my time there. More than half the staff quit within the week. A few months later, I confirmed from someone who stayed on that One Fair Wage was officially defunct. He and one other were the only ones left. Other campaigns were paying significantly more, and everyone who had ever worked with One Fair Wage would tell every canvasser they met not to work for One Fair Wage. They literally couldn't find anyone to hire anymore in September, and that's when the last 2 workers officially left One Fair Wage. In September. That is why the One Fair Wage Act never reached, or the Raise the Wage Act, never reached the ballot in 2024. Campaigns literally cannot survive canvasser abuse. I cannot believe that an organization can be so terrible to people. And honestly, that's probably not so bad. There's probably a lot worse. This is what it's like in the campaign world. Get stranded in the desert, wage theft, blatant. Oh, they did not care about us. And this organization hosts events, collaborations with lefty candidates like Bernie Sanders and AOC. And I just have to think that they're not aware of these problems. And for a long time, I wanted to say One Fair Wage as an organization is okay, but Pedro Paredes is not. He's a terrible person. That's what I thought. I thought it was all Pedro. I want to do like a cliffhanger here. I thought it was all Pedro. But in February 2024, One Fair Wage came back to Arizona without Pedro. Holy shit. One Fair Wage without Pedro? Maybe it's gonna be good this time. They shut down within 15 days. They shut down 15 days later. because they didn't want to actually pay their canvassers. They were trying to they hired a private firm, like private political consulting firm, to do the canvassing, and they just didn't pay that firm. So the firm's like, okay, we're done. We're not doing any more. Nope, you sniffed us once. We're done with you. So they shut down 15 days after coming back in February. And then in late March, they came back again. For the third time. March 2024, they start again. And it's more the same. I had a friend who worked in as a manager, as a office manager for One Fair Wage. And it never got better at any point. He told me just straight up in group chats, they told him, yeah, no, erase this guy's hours, do wage theft, trick him into working before he signs the papers, and they tricked him into working before signing the papers. I'd love to have an interview with him, but I haven't spoken to him in a very long time. I don't know if he's watching this video. If he is, I miss you, and I'm sorry that I don't talk to you anymore. So yeah, they continued to screw people over, and Pedro wasn't involved, and so it goes all the way to the top. All the way to the top. One Fair Wage is a crooked organization that only understands itself as being able to run on blood. And that's my blood. That's our blood. That's the blood of the people of Arizona, and it hurts. And so I would love for the One Fair Wage Act to be passed, but I do not want the One Fair Wage organization to do it. I don't want to see them in Arizona again. I can't believe after that entire story, I didn't tell y'all how it ended. So what did happen to the One Fair Wage Act? To the Raise the Wage Act? Did they get enough signatures to make it onto the ballot? Yes and no. They needed 243,000 valid signatures to reach the ballot. And they submitted, I think, about 320,000 signatures, total signatures, before validation. Maybe it was 290. I'll have to check. I'll flash it on the screen right now. So as soon as the courts decided to check whether the signatures were valid, One Fair Wage withdrew all their signatures. They withdrew their signatures as soon as the court started looking at them. Kinda sus. Maybe you shouldn't enforce quotas that make your workers commit fraud in order to pay their bills. Don't do that. Yeah, so campaigns cannot survive on exploitation. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The people will think your campaign. We hate being exploited. We don't like it. And I'll make sure of it. Because I know every fucking canvasser in Arizona. And fucking none of you are going to do this shit to us again. You got that? You got that? I worked in the goddamn Kamala Harris campaign. You think you can pay me $18 an hour, do wage theft on me, leave me stranded in the desert and get away with it? Fucking no way. Fucking no way. Never again can this happen in Arizona. Mark my damn words. Can't call yourself a lefty if that's how you're running things. If you learned something today, or if you enjoyed listening to my voice, or enjoyed hearing about my experiences, or I don't know, enjoyed this video, would like to hear more from me, whether for informational, educational, or entertainment purposes, please do follow me on YouTube. Subscribe to my YouTube. Follow my Twitter. Join my Discord. especially if you live in Arizona, because I am organizing actively in Arizona, because we gotta get some things done. There's some we gotta get to work. The Democrats, they're only gonna be on our side if it's in their material benefit to be on our side. So we gotta organize to make it in their material benefit to be on our side. And also before the primary, it's still anyone's game, isn't it? Yeah, so please join my Discord. Please follow me. Please give me money. I'm broke as fuck because I get abused by all these organizations. Finally starting my own now, but goddamn, jeez.